Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Social Studies class on Thursday today. I hope you enjoyed our lesson on current events on yesterday. And today we're going to go back to history, but we're kind of going to skip forward a little bit and move to the end of the Civil War, when the war is over. Previously, we had been looking at kind of the reasons behind the war, review of what happened when we were in class. We looked at some of the major battles like Gettysburg. But we're going to right now be skipping to the war is over and the impacts of it. If you really were sad that you missed out on information about the war, hit me up and I'll send you some videos. There's way too much information on the actual Civil War. But now we're going to look at the end of the Civil War and move to an era of US history, which is known as Reconstruction. Reconstruction is kind of how the United States put back together the country and rebuilt the South after the end of the Civil War, because the country was literally torn in two during the Civil War. And how we're going to put it back together, what it's going to look like, and who's involved, who's not involved, whose picture of this looks like, is really the major issues of Reconstruction. And this ties to the lessons of today in a major way with current events, because right now we're going through a crisis. It might not be a civil war, but it's still a major crisis where people are dying, people are having their lives upended, and every single person is impacted in some way, definitely very confusing or not good ways right now. But it will be over someday. But when it is over, we're essentially going to have to rebuild or reconstruct society and the country. And similar to reconstructing the country after the Civil War, these issues involve, well, whose image of what we're going to rebuild is this going to look like? Is it the same as before? Is it different? Whose voices are heard while whose are ignored? And so we're going to be looking at these various different perspectives and kind of look at how the connection between reconstructing the country after the Civil War can inform the decisions of how will we reconstruct and rebuild the country after coronavirus right now and in the future. So our aim for today, taking this in bite-sized chunks, is first, we're just going to look at some of these perspectives. Not all of them, but our aim is historians will be able to, in writing, explain, I forgot to add explain, the different perspectives on the meaning of the end of the Civil War. We are going to be, again, looking at what these different perspectives were, because there are a lot of them. We're going to look at kind of major two of them right now, but we're going to be examining this in detail because, again, people felt differently about the end of the Civil War. Not everyone felt on the same side. And there's kind of a major different groups of opinions, which we're going to explore in the future, not just today, but moving forward. So our major groups at the end of the Civil War are first at top, Northerners. These are just the regular people of the North. If you're just a regular person living in, let's say, like Philadelphia or New York, how do you feel about the war being over? And then next is the Southerners, which is, again, just regular people that lived in the South. Maybe you're just a small-scale farmer or someone living in like Richmond or Atlanta, a small person who isn't really that important, but how do you feel as a regular person living in the South about this war being over? Next is a major important group, free blacks. These are the people that used to be slaves, and suddenly there are no slaves anymore. So what do you do? This is your life has completely changed, and how are you integrated into society? What do you want out of your life? And all these major issues. Next is the army, because of course the Northern Army wins and defeats the Confederacy, and they're essentially going to be like an occupying force where there are federal troops kind of running this the South for a really long time. They're a major part too. How do they feel? And then next is a small but unfortunately important group, the Southern racists. These are kind of like the major leaders that were the leaders of the Confederacy, but now that they have lost, they are trying to essentially reestablish the South as it was before the Civil War. They want racism and slavery back. They do not want these free blacks being a part of society right here. They want it all to go back and tell these Southerners here that free blacks are bad and that we should try to put them back in slavery, essentially. This is all a conversation of whose voice is heard and who is going to determine what the future of the South and the country looks like. So again, we're going to be reading mostly primary sources today, kind of identifying or beginning to look at these different perspectives, and we're going to examine this as we move forward too. But again, today, just like people don't agree about how coronavirus impacts us, some people think it's we should just open everything up right away. Some people think that like we should do one thing versus the other. We're going to look at how people felt about the Civil War and how we should reconstruct the country. And this will help us kind of identify how things are complex in society and how do we make sure that we end up with a good version of events not a negative version of events. So the past can help us make better decisions moving forward with this crazy world we live in and that we're all going to have to rebuild after this thing is all over with. So again, make sure you watch all of the videos, answer all the questions, and of course, contact me if you have any questions at all that I can help you with. So next, watch another video. So do your do now, and then we'll move forward.